Welcome back to today's Photo Minute. We could call this nighttime edition because we thought it'd be kind of fun to be out actually showing you showing you the process of us photographing the moon, getting ready to do the full moon tomorrow evening. We have a 98% moon right now, and thought it'd be great to kind of go through a couple of the settings that we'd already posted online and talk a little bit about adjusting your brightness, your exposure, and or your color for these pictures if you're trying to do that with the starting settings that we gave you. I have my camera set up with the telephoto lens on a sturdy tripod. I made sure I had a release, or if not the release, use the self timer. And I went ahead and set up the camera with all the settings that we had already given you. So 2/50th of a second shutter speed, f11 aperture, ISO 400. I did not use autofocus for this picture because I'm actually still, the moon's right in between some trees and branches right now, and so I needed to manually focus on the moon. But if you can get autofocus to work, if you have a clean shot when you're doing this, that is great as well. Actually, I'm going to show you online a pretty cool picture I got of some branches and some leaves with that are sharp with the moon in the backdrop. So you can still shoot through different types of things to get the moon in the picture, or you can shoot the moon up against the clear dark sky as well. I set my white balance at a Kelvin temperature of 5200 degrees Kelvin, which is about the same as direct sunlight or daylight white balance if that's all you have on your camera, or if you feel more comfortable, you probably get auto white balance to work fine as well. I took the first picture, and I already did this right before we came on air. I took the first picture at 2/50th of a second at f11 at 400 ISO, and it was definitely a little bit darker than I wanted. I wanted a little bit brighter on the moon. You got to be careful you don't blow out any detail in the moon, so I was actually checking the flashing highlights to make sure that that also wasn't the case. But if you need to adjust your exposure, being in manual mode, a lot of us aren't necessarily used to adjusting our exposure. There is no exposure compensation when we're in manual mode, like aperture priority and some of the other modes that we might be using. And so what you're going to need to do is adjust one part of the three parts of the triangle. And because I'm already at 400 ISO, I think what I'd probably want to adjust is probably the shutter speed. I'm on a tripod, so there's really no downside to lowering that shutter speed down. If I need a brighter picture, I'd lower the shutter speed, go a little bit slower than the 2/50th that we suggested as your starting point. And then if you need a darker picture, if your picture's too bright, then you'd actually go up on the shutter speed. If for any reason you don't feel comfortable adjusting the shutter speed to get the correct exposure, then the second choice I would suggest would be the aperture. You would go down on the aperture, lower number aperture if you wanted the resulting picture to be a little bit brighter, and up on the aperture if you wanted the resulting picture to be a little bit darker. I would take a couple test shots, and what I'm really looking for when I'm shooting the moon is to make sure that that moon is nice and bright, but that if there are any flashing highlights, sometimes we actually call those blinkies, if there's any flashing highlights, that they're just very, very, very minimal. That's warning us that there's a part of that moon that's flashing that's blown out, and we don't want to be losing too much detail on that moon. So we want the moon to be as bright as we can get it without having any flashing highlights in the resulting test shots that we take. One other thing that came up with some of you as we were looking through some of our Facebook posts and some of the responses was about the color. And so if you think the moon is a little too yellowish looking, then you're going to want to move your Kelvin temperature on your camera down under white balance. And so I actually found that I liked closer to 4800 degrees Kelvin. I like that moon to be neutral or even a tad bluish looking. And so if you want a little bit cooler white balance, you're going to go down on your Kelvin temperature from that 5200 degrees starting point. And if you do want it a little bit warmer, you're going to go up above 5200 degrees Kelvin to get a little bit warmer, a little bit more yellowish tone as well. Now, if the color's not perfect, you can easily adjust that when you get into the editing part of the process. You definitely do want to make sure that your exposure is really, really solid. And have fun photographing the moon. I'll post a few pictures of kind of the test shots that I did to get to this point, as well as a neat shot of a leaf silhouetted with the moon behind it. You don't have to wait until you get into clear open sky without any obstructions in order to get some neat shots as you're starting setup. Hope we're going to get this chance to be out tomorrow night, all of us shooting the full moon. It's actually a super moon tomorrow night, and I hope this has been helpful as well. Thank you for joining me, Brian Osborne, at today's Photo Minute. Have a great evening.